I'm Brook Richan. I attended here in Harrington 1959, kindergarten through 5th grade. My brother, 3 years younger, attended here. My sister, 3 years younger than that, attended here. My mother and father attended here starting in 1927. And my grandmother attended here starting in 1903. She attended grades 1 through 8. That was the highest grade that she attended. That was the end of her formal education. My mother and father met here in Harrington. And my father tells the story of first grade. He was taught by Florence Dunyan, who he described as a kind and gentle, excellent teacher. Then in 3rd grade, I had Mrs. Hill, who started out to be kind of sick at the beginning of the year. And Mrs. Dunyan came back as a substitute teacher and taught me for 3rd grade. In 3rd grade, when my dad was here, he was taught by Anna Miller. He tells a story of her that she demonstrated to the children how to brush their teeth. And she brushed her teeth so vigorously during the demonstration that she started to bleed, and with the foam from the toothpaste, looked like she was foaming bloody stuff out of her mouth, and it traumatized the children so much that only the stout-hearted would brush their teeth thereafter. But Dad said that didn't bother him because he didn't own a toothbrush. My brother, he was mentally handicapped. So not only did he attend here as a student, starting in kindergarten, but later came back when this was used primarily for special education. My grandmother's name is Matilda Johnson Richan. Later, she lived just down the street here, about 5 blocks. And that's where my dad grew up. And my mother's name was Barbara Sager. And since her last name started with an S and my dad's last name started with an R, they were frequently seated together alphabetically. And Dad said in about 9th grade that he started to finally recognize and pay attention to her. But my mom confessed that starting in 2nd grade here at Harrington, she had a crush on him. But that was the beginning of what Dad described as a beautiful relationship. She passed away in '91. My father passed away in 2007, so 9 years ago. His name was Keith Richan. He was quite active here in the community for many years, politically and otherwise. I have a lot of memories of the school here. I remember being a crossing guard just up the street here in 5th grade. I remember also being able to be given the great privilege of being able to hand out the balls during the lunch break. We were in a little dungeon on the other side of the school where we kept the balls and we could hand them out and have people sign up for them. Also remember in 3rd grade, Joel Adamson and I, he was from Highland, we would make a little hut in the corner bushes here at the school and hide out in the bushes. Favorite teacher was probably Mrs. Tolton. She was up in the upper corner here, and I had her for 4th grade. And the reason why she was one of my favorite teachers is because she took an interest in me and my interest in math, and decided to give me some extra work to keep me busy with math. There were these little red and green and purple books that we could open up and write our answers in the margins. And I worked through those. Another favorite teacher was Mr. Johnson in 5th grade. Now, in 4th grade, everybody warned us about Mr. Johnson. Said he was the worst teacher ever, and do whatever you can to avoid having to be taught by him. So when the first day of 5th grade arrived, I ran up the stairs, looked at the list on the door of Mr. Nelson, because he would have been my first pick. My name was not there. Ran over to Mr. Vance's room, looked for my name there, it wasn't there. Ran over to Mr. Johnson's, fearing that it might be there, and sure enough, it was there. So for many months, Joel Adamson and I decided that our job was to give Mr. Johnson the worst time ever because he was such a horrible teacher. Finally, by about January or February, I guess I'd done a pretty good job of being pretty horrible. So he called Mom and Dad. Mom and Dad came down for a visit, and Dad turned to me and said, "Brooke, what's the deal? Why don't you like Mr. Johnson? Why are you causing so much trouble?" And I sat and thought, and I couldn't come up with a good answer. I didn't know why I was being, I didn't know why Mr. Johnson was a bad teacher. I'd just been told he was. So as I started thinking about it, there was no good reason, and from that point on, I decided that Mr. Johnson probably wasn't that bad after all. And he became one of my best teachers. And so I repented, and he was one of my best teachers ever. And I'm sorry for all the grief that I gave him.